Hey guys, so today's video is going to be part 2 of my summer reading wrap up, and this video is going to have all of the young adult books that I read as well as just some miscellaneous books that I don't really have a category for. So let's start with the young adult fantasy reads. By far my favorite young adult fantasy I read so far this year was A Curse So Dark and Lonely, and this is a Beauty and the Beast retelling, but it actually has a modern day element with our main character from Washington, D.C., and she has cerebral palsy and kind of gets pulled into this alternate dimension where she's staying in the castle with the Beast character and then his guard. And this book is just fantastic. I don't want to say too much more about it because it is kind of already telling you a lot by saying that it is a Beauty and the Beast retelling, but I really enjoyed this and will for sure be continuing with the series. I have a disappointing book to talk about, and I do have a full review for it, so I won't really be talking too much about it here, but I did want to mention that I read Midnight Sun by Stephanie Meyer. I was very disappointed. This is Twilight in Edward's perspective, and I found his perspective to be boring and very redundant and just very long-winded for no reason. So this book was a big flop for me. I still liked it only because it was Twilight, but as for the actual book, I did not think it was really that interesting at all, and my other friends were all reading it together, and I'm the only one who finished it. I also read a paranormal romance, young adult fiction, I don't know what it's even classified at. It's called Storm and Fury by Jennifer Armentrout, and this is about a girl who seems to be human, but the whole time in this book they're kind of hinting at the fact that she is actually some really wonderful, crazy, awesome mythical being. We don't know what it is, but she's living at this compound where gargoyles train, and gargoyles basically fight demons and protect the humans, and we just don't know what this girl is. So basically just her guardians and her protector knows what she is and knows her powers and capabilities, and there's just a lot of drama happening, just some strange demon stuff that's going on. There's an adventure and a very cringy romance. Like, this was so cringy. I haven't read like a tropey cringy romance in a book in so long, so this was a huge disappointment for me in that way. Overall, like maybe a 3-star because it wasn't the worst, but definitely not something that I'm going to continue with the series for unless you convince me that the second book is better. But yeah, I didn't really like this. I listened to it on audio and it took me very long time to read, like a few weeks, so that it wasn't for me. I tried, it wasn't it. And then I actually finished finally the 3 Dark Crowns series by Kendare Blake with 5 Dark Fates is the 4th and final book, and I enjoyed this as an ending, but I am just really picky with endings, and in general I don't really like finales or the ending of any type of book series or TV series or anything like that because I just don't like things being over. So this one wasn't really, it actually was pretty good. It wasn't really that bad. I still just had some issues with the way things were wrapped up, but overall this series was really good and one I would recommend to a lot of people. It had such a unique concept for the world with these 3 triplet sisters who are all raised differently with different magic, and they're raised that they're one day going to kill their other sisters, and the last one alive standing is going to be the queen of this country. So a very weird concept, but it was very interesting like the whole time. The series definitely changed a lot from the beginning, but it was a very interesting world and one I hadn't read before. Then I read a young adult dystopian which I really enjoyed called Followers. So what I really liked about this book was that it just seemed like it was very realistic. Like the things that happen in this book could actually happen. You're following a storyline in 2015 with this young girl. She lives in New York City and she works as a writer for this gossip blog, and she basically gets her roommate famous, and it's following her story of fame as she's kind of the one who got her roommate famous and their role in social media and how social media affects them. So that plays a part because the future story, the world is very different, and the way that people use social media is very different than how we currently use it, and so you're just kind of reading about what were the events that led up to the world being the way that it is. So a very interesting book. It kept me hooked the whole entire time, and definitely loved it so much because it felt like this was our world and like this is stuff that could actually happen. So I really enjoyed that. And I did read a young adult contemporary romance, and that was Tweet Cute. This book was adorable, like probably 4.5, 5 stars. I loved it from start to finish because it's a mix of A Cinderella Story and You've Got Mail, which are 2 of my favorites. This is following 2 seniors in high school who are just trying to figure out what to do with the rest of their lives. They are both the children of parents who own like food companies, and they kind of get involved in some social media stuff as well, and I don't really want to spoil anything, but I really liked their relationship. It kind of starts off like a hate enemies kind of thing and turns into friendship, and then obviously a relationship develops, but it was about so much more than just the relationship. There's a lot about the family dynamics as these people are trying to, you know, figure out how to talk to parents and what are their expectations and dealing with sibling stuff. So there really was just a lot to the story that made it so good, and I liked it, like I said, from start to finish. Next, I'm just going to get into the miscellaneous section, starting with some of the book of the month picks that I got. So I got and read The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett, and this book is fantastic. It's like a 4.5 star for sure. This is literary / historical fiction, as far as I know. That's the category, but who knows, I may be off. This is about twin sisters growing up in the 60s, and they live in a very small town. The color of their skin looks like they would be white. They're raised black, basically. And these twins kind of diverge at one point in their lives. The one twin, she keeps her black heritage and she lives her life as black, and the other twin kind of lives her life as a white person. And it's following both of these twins as they're living their lives. So this story spans decades, honestly, and it actually even follows the daughter too of one of the twins. So I really liked the multi-generational aspect of this story, and there was just a lot of good commentary on race and identity and where you're from. There was just a lot that was really good about this, so I for sure would recommend this. And then I read a nonfiction, which never happens, but this one was so good. Beauty and Breaking by Michelle Harper. This was another book of the month selection following a black female doctor, and it actually has different cases of the patients she's taken care of over her time as a doctor, and how those cases have really helped to shape her life and taught her some lessons about herself and about the world. So just a lot of good commentary in this book in general, but also if you really like a medical drama or anything medically related, super interesting, engaging in that way as well. So it was a really good combination of both. It kept me super interested, and like I said, each chapter is kind of about like a different patient case, so it's all following like a consecutive timeline for the most part, but you're also learning about the doctor as she grew up in a very abusive household and how that shaped her life as well. So this is definitely a book I would recommend to pretty much everybody. It was really good. I also read a historical fiction called Next Year in Havana, and this was unlike any other historical fiction I'd read. It actually is talking about the Cuban Revolution, and it has 2 storylines, which a lot of historical fiction does that, but I really love that anytime it's done because it definitely keeps me interested in each perspective that I'm reading from. So the one perspective is from a young woman, the daughter of a very wealthy family in Cuba, and it's her love story, but she's kind of grown up in this privileged society and doesn't know much about the rest of Cuba. She kind of just turns a blind eye to it. So the rebel kind of like opens her eyes really to what's happening, and she's kind of she's learning about her country in ways that she never has before, and about how her wealth and has really helped her family and society, and how, you know, the rest of Cuba is suffering because of that. And you also have the story of the granddaughter of that woman, and it's years later, and her grandmother has passed away, and she's coming back to Cuba to lay her grandmother's ashes to rest because her grandmother never got to go back to Cuba, and she always wanted to because she loved Cuba. Didn't know anything really about Cuba and its history, so it was very eye-opening. Even though this is fiction, I know obviously like a lot of this was based in fact, and even with modern day Cuba, there's a lot that I still really didn't know about. So I would for sure recommend this if you're looking to learn about a different cultural perspective, but also like fiction like I do. This was just perfect for that. And the final book I have to talk about in this video is Recursion by Blake Crouch. This book was another fantastic book by him. I give this like 5 stars. I read this with my husband and his cousin, and it was just such a good book for a buddy read because there's so much that happens. I can kind of tell you how the book starts, but it really takes off in a completely different direction multiple times throughout the book. So a brief premise that won't spoil anything. It follows the character of Helena, and she has a mother who has Alzheimer's, and her life's goal is to find a cure for Alzheimer's. Scientific research has her really studying memory. And then you're also following the character of Barry. He's a cop in New York City, and it's a couple years after Helena's timeline. He encounters a case with a woman who kills herself because of this syndrome called false memory syndrome, which is basically a thing that happens when people are living their lives normally, and one day they're inundated with all of these memories of a life they didn't live at all, but they feel like they lived them, and it's very confusing for them. People who have false memory syndrome have a very high suicide rate, and so Barry kind of gets investigating down this trail and that's where I'm going to leave the synopsis, but it was very good. I found it to be super fast paced, and like I said, the story did keep changing. The timeline was wild. It was a really good book. If you read Dark Matter, you definitely need to read this one. If you like science fiction, or really if you just like fiction in general and just like a really good fast plot with excellent characters, this is definitely one that I would recommend because it was fantastic. So that is going to wrap up part 2. Anyway, thank you so much for watching and happy reading.